Happy Friday.
We're kicking off Friday, man. We got to bring the energy, right? Make those donations, please.
Do it.
Donate,
200
donate.
an hour.
It's all for a good cause. So as part of PitchCon, we've been asked to talk about hitters, which is either an honor or I don't know what you guys said to Nick to piss him off. But, we decided to do some sleepers. We got some busts. You want to jump right in? Should we do it?
Let's do it, guys.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's stay positive as much as we can with the sleepers because that's always fun to talk about. But I will give a preview. One of Joe's busts was Anthony Volpe. I don't know if you guys are card guys, but I've been buying a lot of Anthony Volpe lately. So we can get into that a little later or maybe offline. But I wanted to start with the one I thought was the most interesting. And I got a note here on Vans. Matt Wallner. I'm not like picking one at random, but I feel like this is a guy who is like your prototypical Minnesota outfielder, Alex Kirilloff type coming up, has that power, has an opportunity. We have no idea how playing time could shake out for him really because they have weird tendencies sometimes. But the floor is yours, sir. Like, what is Matt Wallner just a guy who's going to have like crazy power and find his way into the lineup? Is that why you like him so much? I got his ADP. Well, you said his ADP.
I think so. Yeah. So I saw his ADP at 368. So of my list, Nando, this is the deepest one that I have. But I kind of see the upside here as being like this year's Jake Berger with just like that power binge that, moves him up the lineup. I doubt he'll get moved like Berger did. But what we saw from Wallner last year was just insane batted ball stuff. On the surface, he had 14 homers in 76 games. So like solid pop. But underlying 18.8% barrel rate and something my podcast, I'm with Pitcher List and I do a podcast with Steve Giswelli, Wins Above Fantasy. We had Alex Chamberlain come on a couple years back and talk about his blast rate metric, which basically takes the cream of the crop barrels. So it removes any weak barrels based on launch angle or kind of on the lower side of exit velocity. So blast rate is really like the subset of barrels. Matt Wallner was fourth in the entire majors in his blast rate last year. So when this guy actually hits the ball, it's as good a contact as like prime Giancarlo Stanton, which is saying a ton. So he could be a 40 homer guy if he gets the plate appearances, but he is slated to platoon right now. He's slated to hit seventh. So definitely things have to kind of break right for this to be a home run. No pun intended, but I think at ADP 368, it's totally worth the dart throw because he could be a 40 home run hitter.
Joe, when you look at someone like Matt Wallner, our buddy Matt, when you look at someone like him and like just what Van was saying, like he's slated to, hit seventh and platoon maybe. Are you looking at that like, well, he's going to be good enough to full-time roll himself and probably like move up in the lineup if he's mashing balls and getting on base and stuff? Or are you kind of like resigned to the fact that, this is the system that the Twins have in place and this is where he's going to be, so I have to value him like that?
I think you go into it thinking and expecting the platoon to still be there. You hope the cream rises to the top, right? And in this case, Wallner would be that. But you never know, right? I mean, they could just be stuck in their ways. A lot of organizations do that. The managers just want to get the playing time, please a lot of people. You see that all the time. But I mean, I like him as a hitter. And it's a free space, if it's free square at that point, drafted him super late or you grab it on the waiver wire in a lot of your leagues type of thing. So the risk is not, there's no risk in drafting him really. You're getting super late and the potential is there. So I like it.
He does struggle versus lefties quite a bit. So something would have to change, but I feel like at that late, you probably still could find value even if he is a full-time platoon, like a Luke Raley was in NFBC leagues, like something like that. But it's a good name for sure.
Yo, Van, when you're looking at something like that, I just want to bring like, do you Google? Because I remember it's like Yohan Moncada right before his breakout season. I was like, oh, he strikes out too much, he doesn't walk. But I was reading the reports and like, oh, he's spending the entire off season in Chicago working on walking more. Like, are you just like crazy Googling Matt Wallner to be like, what? Like, has he gone to Driveline and are they focusing like solely on hitting lefties? Like,
you know what? That's such a good question, man. Like I love talking about process because I think we all start with kind of the home base websites, whether it's Baseball Savant, Pitcher List, Fangraphs, like the data is all there, but then data can kind of point you in a direction that you need to dig in further on, whether it's searching Twitter or Googling. And I have not seen a ton from Wallner around like Driveline. Honestly, the only Driveline names on the hitter side I've really seen is like Ty France has been in a lot of headlines on a resurgence. But yeah, I haven't seen much there, but all definitely as we get closer to like spring training, that's when kind of the news and the storylines come out. Maybe he's been working on a different approach versus left-handed pitching, things like that. But yeah, so far this is strictly on the fact that he just hits the crap out of the ball.
Joe, is your process the same? Is it like hit all this, like let's go to roster resource real quick and see, and like maybe like a Mike Curlin chart during spring training to see who's moving up and down? Is it basically universal what we do here? Like check out Baseball Reference, hide partial rows, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, I start with projections based, and then kind of divvy up who's gonna steer away from projections based off of Curlin's spring training chart. I love that thing. Looking at roster resource, see where guys are projected there in the lineup, and just keeping tabs on the news and stuff like that. So that's where kind of your gut feel comes into play.
Joe, let's pick on one of yours, man. I thought Andres Jimenez was a great one because that guy has been like a roller coaster, sleeper bust, sleeper bust, sleeper bust. Like right when we get to love him, he's a letdown. And then we're like, oh, well, that guy, he was a bum. And then you're like, oh, no, wait, sorry. I forgot, he's 280 with 30 home runs now. So we're expecting a good season, I assume.
Yeah. I mean, I'm expecting a little bit of a bounce back. His ADP seems people are looking at last year and going, oh, okay, he didn't quite live up to the expectations. And so I feel like it's just sort of the consensus. Oh, he was a bit of a bust last year compared to where he's being drafted. So I'm out on him. And when you really look at it, though, like he still hit 15 home runs. He still stole 30 bases. It's a pretty good season. The batting average drop was the big one. It's a little unlucky. BABIP dropped to 289. He wasn't hitting the ball quite as hard as the seasons past. I mean, there was a little bit kind of going in there. The Guardians were kind of a mess early on. Jose Ramirez was struggling, so that didn't help things at all either. I'm just really buying into the talent overall here with Jimenez and the power speed combo. You're not going to get 30 home runs from the guy, but I think 20 is easily attainable by him, and you're obviously going to get the steals. So I just think he's being undervalued because recency bias.
Van, are you looking at Jimenez as anything that interests you? Are you just kind of like, which one's the real Andres Jimenez?
Yeah. So remind me his ADP again, Joe.
So I pulled up like the last couple of weeks on NFBC, and it's around 109.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of a good range. To me, he's kind of a discount Nico Horner, who I loved last year at this same range. Like, I think the one thing that jumps out with this player type is people always kind of overlook runs as a category. And when we were doing, in like 5x5 leagues, people go to homers, people go to steals, average. But when we were doing an auction calculator exercise on one of our podcasts, we kept seeing, players like this that score runs and kind of tally up runs or RBIs getting more and more valuable on the auction calculator. So I think it might be more of a team need dependent. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but if I feel like I don't have guys who are getting me good runs and speed, Jimenez is a great kind of discount Nico Horner, since that tax is going up a little bit. You got to get him closer to like the 60s. Plus you're addressing second base, which you always have to have a plan for, right?
Let me ask you guys, because just going off of what you just said, Joe, if we're talking about auctions in a 5x5, these guys on your list, probably, not as deep as we've been talking so far, but Andres Jimenez, if you really like him, you're computing what, like maybe like $3 or $4 extra bucks on him? Is that, or do you just like go like maybe 6? Like how important it is for you to get like your, and I'll go Joe, I'll go to you first. Like since this is your guy, like how important is like a Jimenez or some of these sleepers? And do you have a strategy about when you want to like first 2 call outs, wait and hope nobody else is on him? How do you work that?
So I'll be perfectly honest with you. I actually don't play in a lot of auction leagues. It's actually been a couple of years since I've jumped into an auction league. But
this is a good time, man.
My general strategy with auction is I'm not usually one of the go after the Ronald Acuñas and spend half my budget on one dude, if not more. So, I do kind of look for these like sleeper guys that people are a little more out on. And yeah, I might spend an extra $1 just to get him because he provides a lot of stats in a lot of categories. So he's going to kind of fill the board for you. I had no issues going after, especially if it's a team need, you need second base, you need some steals late, right? If he were one of the first guys to go off the board, that's tough because someone might really want him and that's why he went out there that early, or you throw him out there early and maybe he goes cheap because people are trying to save their money. Auctions are so tough to like predict and really give advice for, in my opinion, because they're all very, very different.
Right. But I guess it's just like I get nuts sometimes. I'm like this year's going to be Oscar Colas for me, and it's going to be like I hear his name and I'm just looking at a pile of cash next to me, and I'm like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to get this guy.
Wow. So Nando, tell us about that, because I was in on Colas last year, and man, like I think one of my bold predictions was that he would win AL Rookie of the Year, and then it was just such a bad season. So I'm curious, like you're liking a bounce back?
It's exactly that. Like I'm willing to give him a pass for last year based on what we liked about him before. So that
I've got a couple guys like that. When we were doing the rundown, I was like, 1 year is not enough time to totally write it. Like if it's 3 or 4 years, like an Andrew Vaughn, eventually you can be like, okay, this is who this guy is. But if it's only been 1 year, like there's a lot of those use cases, right?
And like to me, it's like I remember. Maybe I'm dating myself, but Brendan Wood, this the Angels shortstop prospect who was mashing like 40 homers in the minors and got up and just like it was a combination of them not playing him enough. And I guess just like not having it, maybe. But he was supposed to be like the man. And I just remember like I was so in on him. Like every year I had faith. I'm like, this is the year, this is the year, this is the year. And it never was for whatever reason. But like with a guy like Colas, there's a path to playing time. Like I see 550 at bats coming out of this, which is a big factor in, everything for me.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. He has a great skill, like toolsy skill set, which is why I was so in last year. So I like that you're not moving off him. He's back on my radar.
So I was always on Adolis Garcia, like had him in all my dynasties, had him in my score sheet leagues. And then every year. And then when he got designated for assignment, I'm like, all right, like this is Brendan Wood all over again. And then of course he had the breakout season, but like all that, like, they DFA'd him. They did like there was no way. I'm like, this guy's never gonna play. They have like 17 outfielders ahead of him, and so I'm willing to hold on a little bit more now because of that. I missed out on the guy. Van, let's hit Brendan Donovan. Speaking of your hat, and I feel that like Joe, if you still want to sneak in an Oriole, we can theme that, right?
They're actually all going pretty high priced outside of maybe like an Austin Hayes, who I think is for a forgotten man.
Yeah,
but we can hit on him in a minute.
Yeah,
but I did like Brendan Donovan. I thought was interesting too. Like it's St. Louis not a fool me once, fool me twice with O'Neill and all that. Like these guys were supposed to just like
No, I'm excited about Donovan, and I think this is a perfect segue from Colas because he's an exact instance of this. In March last year, he was fast rising as like an industry sleeper, and actually a later sleeper. Like in January, everyone was talking about Nootbaar, no one was talking about Donovan. Then the news came out that he switched his bat, he put on muscle. I think he was a driveline guy, and he was popping homers in spring training to where people were like, okay, you got our attention. Had a terrible start to the season along with every other St. Louis Cardinal. But if you can kind of like that almost is keeping his price down because now the ADP is at 294. At the end of last year's drafts, he was going at like 180, 190. So you're getting 100 picks off. And honestly, when you take a step back and look at what he did, he kind of found what we were all hoping he would get to. So he ended up with an expected average of 288, which is what you're going to get with Donovan. His hit tool is such a high floor. He leads off for the Cardinals, so the potential's there. But from May 21st until his July 29th injury, so 6 weeks, I know small sample size, but he had an 883 OPS and was trending toward like 25 homer pop. So when you put all of that together, probably just to continue to rant, you could tell I'm a Cardinals guy, but there's an awesome piece that I was reading from Redbird's Rant, kind of a fan-based content site. this guy, Josh Jacobs, who wrote the article, he also talked with Brendan Donovan at the winter warmup and asked him, like, hey, for you to go night and day on this performance breakout, what happened? Like, was there an approach change? And Donovan point blank was like, yeah, we're always making tweaks in the majors. For this particular instance, I found I was being way too passive on first pitches. So I decided, like, my whole career, I was a first pitch aggressive guy. Then this year I was way too passive. If you look at his splits, it is clear as day that, like, on that date forward, he was a lot more aggressive on first pitch swinging. His zone swings were way up, and his ex-Wobacon or Wobacon jumped from 350 to 391. So, like, that's where I'm always trying to back a narrative with the data. And it's really nice when a guy like Josh Jacobs does it for you. But pair that with how hype everyone was about Brendan Donovan last year. He's second base eligible. Like, I love this sleeper pick at 294. I think Donovan could be a 280 guy, hit 20 homers, help out with 8 steals, and get a ton of runs in that Cardinals lineup.
Joe, your opinion on Brendan Donovan, if you have one.
I liked him last year too, coming in, and yeah, I was a little disappointed, and obviously the injury hit, but yeah, I mean, everything that Van just said is spot on. I mean, and then some. Like, some of that stuff I didn't even know about. Like, I didn't dig into the numbers quite that big with him because he wasn't my pick. But yeah, I mean, he's got the hit tool. You like that. The batting average is going to be there. He's just got to stay healthy, stay on the field, get out of that platoon a little bit too himself. But I mean, I'm kind of buying a bounce back for all the Cardinals players. That organization is just too good to be this bad. Like, it's so weird, like, to say that, they were last place in their division. Like, that just never happens.
Yeah.
This organization usually makes all the right moves, all the right decisions, all the right changes that they need to. And I believe, getting Goldschmidt, back on track, getting Arenado back on track. Gutierrez won't be such a hot mess this year, hopefully. That's going to help all the other surrounding players around them, the guys that don't have quite the star power like a Brendan Donovan.
Joe, what about Arenado? I mean, we've talked about some young guys. Arenado, I mean, he's not, I'm 45, right? So I'm not going to call Nolan Arenado old, but it's kind of like, wow, this guy's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Do you think that plays into, like, why he's not going as high as he should? Do you think it's the off season? Do you think, like, no longer in Colorado still kind of stigmatizes him a little bit?
I do. I mean, when you really look, like, he did have a down year last year for sure. They all did, like we just said. The big thing with me is that 2 of the last 3 years, his batting average hasn't been what we are used to, right? We're used to, like, 290, 300. 2022, it was 290. His first year in St. Louis, it was 255. Last year, it was 266. He's striking out a little bit more those couple of years. He's hitting more. Last year, he hit a lot of ground balls. It was really strange. Like, almost doubled his rate from the previous season. So I'm banking on the fact that he's just too good of a hitter to not make the tweaks needed to get back to at least like a 275 batting average. Like, maybe he's not 300 anymore, but the power is going to be there if he can, stay healthy. He missed a few games last year. And he's just, like I said, he's just too good of a hitter. He is going way too low in drafts. Him and Alex Bregman, kind of the same type of case, right? They're old news, they're just kind of like, oh, well, we know what we're getting. They're boring. Sometimes boring is good in fantasy. Like, it's reliable. Like, you take advantage of it.
Let me ask, I got a philosophical question. Van, I'll go to you for this one. Like, at this time last year, maybe not this time, but, like, a month from now last year, I think a lot of us were looking at, like, who got shifted on the most. Like, we go run a baseball savant, like, who got shifted on the most? Whoever it was, we're like, oh, let me upgrade them, like, maybe 40 picks because there's no more shift. The steals rule changes, fine, whatever. But, like, do you feel like, were you looking at someone like Arenado who dipped that much and we're like, oh, maybe it's the shift, maybe it's something else, maybe this year will help? And I guess anyone that you maybe hit on that same kind of philosophy, like, it's gonna be better without the shift, and then they weren't. Like, are you going back to the well? Are you like, oh, well, I guess that didn't mean as much. Like, how are you approaching that now, the second year of this rule?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I tend to start with, like, left-handed hitters that have a high ground ball rate is who I was looking for, that, like, the shift could impact that much. I think in general, like, I would have to know that they were a big ground ball hitter in order for me to, like, go out and dig deeper to see if the shift is a reason to like change expectations. But someone like Arenado, like when I look at just like the season he had, he's a pole fly ball hitter. He hits a lot of line drives as well. Like I'm with Joe that I think this is a little bit more of kind of a one-off exception versus the rule in terms of what Arenado can do. I think there's a little bit of ageism going on with his draft price being down there at 102. Like the auction calculator still kind of likes him as well as a good value at third. And third's another position that like it falls off a cliff pretty quickly. So yeah, I still like Arenado overall. And yeah, in terms of, sorry to derail, in terms of like process on that, to me, I have to kind of know the players, see their profile a little bit before I go into searching for the rules, at least that deep. Like the run environment, you can do a little bit quicker, but something like the shift, I think, is a little more complex.
By the way, just want to remind everyone watching, if you're watching, well, somewhere below us, Nick talked about it. I haven't seen it running, but if you want to donate, this is all going to charity. Everything out of this is going to charity to help fight ALS. And if you want to get in the mix for the giveaways, we are not eligible. It's only about, we were told, I think that was in bold in the email we got, like, sorry, panelists, you can't win anything. But there's some stuff from RotoWire in there. There's actually RotoWire and RotoWire. Both have some prizes. I know The Athletic gave a couple subscriptions. There's a bunch of cool stuff. So check it out. Donate a little money. Consider it like a raffle ticket and help us get to $10,000 and beyond. I really feel like we get to 15. There are a couple days left. We're already like 77. Yeah, I think it'll work.
Man, I was watching the weekend. On like Wednesday, I was watching when Jeff Passan came in as like the surprise guest, and Nick was like, "We're already a third to our goal," and Jeff was like, "Well, I'll tell you what, Nick, put another $1,000 down for my name there." And I was like, "Look at this guy, man! He's just dropping the Passan bombs in more way than one."
I tried to get Adam Azer to cameo on here, but he had no interest. Yeah, and then I tried Chris Vaccaro and he disappeared. So
that's funny. I've done shows with Scott White and with Frank Stanfield, but never Adam Azer. And those guys were the ones who got me into the podcast world. So I'll have to track down Adam. But he does he still do baseball stuff, or is it just football?
He's gotten too big time now for baseball. He can't.
Come on, man.
But deep down,
Adam.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, come on, dude. You're talking for 45 minutes. Such a hard world.
Right.
Let's talk about Vinny Pasquantino. And Van, I know this is yours, but I feel like it's Joe's turn to talk. If that's okay.
Oh yeah. We're loose.
This is another guy who I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give him a pass. He's a masher to me. In that Steve Balboni, Kansas City corner infielder type masher tradition. Joe, do you have any thoughts on him at all, man? Are you in on like this Kansas City lineup's really interesting to me? Like they've got a really interesting makeup that is not like your traditional try to hit doubles lineup.
Yeah, I struggle with Pasquantino. I really do. We just did our I do my like kind of too early top 10 list for each position, and I just did a video, recapping that on our YouTube channel. And Pasquantino's name came up because I did not have him in my top 10. I don't know what it is. Like there's just not enough there for me to really like him all that much. He's I guess you can call him I don't know, sort of reliable. Like if I miss on everybody else, sure, I'll plug him in type first baseman for me. I believe there's more power than there was last year. I think he could, if he can play the full season, I think we're looking at like 20, maybe 25 max home runs. There'll be no steals. I think the batting average is probably going to hover around, 280. We've seen it higher, but I'm not really sure that's going to be there. And, the Royals offense outside of a couple of guys is, ultimately going to struggle this season, as we, usually get, unfortunately. So that's going to lower some of the counting, the runs and the RBI, things like that. I don't know. Like it's weird to say, and I say this all the time about it, but he gives me Eric Hosmer vibes. Like he's just a guy. Like he's gonna have a breakout year, and everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, there it is," and then the very next year, it's just not gonna happen again.
Do you worry that'll come with like a 220? Like I think of a guy like that, and I'm surprised you actually said 280 because I think sometimes when you trade off that power jump, it's here we go, another 220 hitting first baseman, right? I like how you said 280 at least. Like that's better.
Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't
Mon-Fri.
strike out enough to, I think, plummet like some of these other guys. His BABIP last year was 250. His expected batting average was 279. So there you go.
Joe, are we talking prime Eric Hosmer? I'm hoping that's what we're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. But even if you look at prime
Diego?
Eric Hosmer, again, he only had like 2 seasons that you're looking at and going like, oh, there it is. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, 18 home runs, 22 home runs.
I need 2017 Hosmer, 25 homers, a 318 batting average, 94 RBIs. Like that would be solid for Vinny.
Yeah, I mean that'd be all right. But then the very next year he comes back. That was his contract year, right? Comes back, 18 home runs, 250 batting average. Like I'm afraid that's what he is at this point. Well, he's got to bounce up and down.
I don't know that he has the ground ball problem that Hosmer, I feel like he was the poster boy for that. But yeah, I mean, all through the minors, not only did he hover around 300, but what I get starry eyed with Vinny P on is that he had like an ISO north of 250. So when I see his, now he's played 130 games in the majors, I know that's starting to be a pretty legit sample size, but his ISO has been 155 and 190. I think the path here is that he is not a 20 homer, 25 max guy. I think he taps into this 25 to 35 range. So he looks a little bit more like prime Freddie Freeman with obviously the lineup context isn't as good, but I think that's the upside is he Freddie Freeman or is he just a guy? But he is the 17th first baseman off the board. So at least you don't have to pay too much in terms of investment, but no doubt this is starting to become the judgment window for Vinny P, right? I mentioned Andrew Vaughn, it seems like we've kind of moved on from that. It seems like he's got this year, if he stays healthy, before it's really going to be the Kelnick type of judgment of, all right, he's not who we thought he was.
I will say this. I do have him above ADP in my rankings and in any, on our cheat sheet, it does the same thing over there. Fantasy Six Pack, so I may end up falling into a bunch of shares of Vinny P just because my board tells me he's the next guy. If I need a first baseman around there, it really could work out. He's got that potential, especially from the minors that that ceiling is there, like you're talking about, Van. But man, almost a full season sample size in the pros, and it just hasn't clicked yet. Yeah. That is a worry.
It's concerning. Yeah.
Joe, let me ask you on behalf of Van and Italians everywhere, if this would change, so I just pulled up roster resource real quick. They got Melendez batting leadoff, Bobby Witt, Salvador Perez, Pasquantino batting cleanup, Hunter Renfroe right behind him. And then it's Michael Massey, Nestlin Velasquez, Kyle Isbell, Michael Garcia. They're not talking about Nick Prado in here as the DH really. And they had some other guys coming up. And plus it's January 26th. And, everyone's making a big deal about how many free agents are still out there. If they made a move, and if we're sitting there in May, Nick Prado's up there as the DH and he's hitting home runs, would that change it at all? I mean, you could get some counting stats out of this at least. I think the guys in front of him, at least he could drive in, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe this is a 90 RBI season from Vinny Pasquantino. I don't know. I get 90 RBI vibes from this lineup.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is anybody surprised that Melendez is leading off considering how bad he was last year? That's a weird one to me. But
I don't get him. I had him in a couple dynasty leagues. Following him all the way up. And I'm like, man, that was a weird season for MJ Melendez.
Yes.
Yeah. Big time.
I don't really know what quite to take from that one because he was really, really good up until last year.
He was another one. The discipline. It's a weird profile to be leadoff, but he was another one just because I went on that rant earlier about the blast percentage, that subset of barrels. He was another one who kind of popped in that chart. So batted ball stuff is good, but he's just pretty volatile for a leadoff guy.
I thought for sure it was going to turn around. Every day it was all right, now's the day. It's going to turn over for Melendez. Always hitting the ball he hit the ball harder than anybody in baseball last year. It felt like constantly. It just out. Always getting out.
Kaufman, man. Kaufman's kind of And Vinny P was rumored to be. I actually saw. So you were talking, Nando, about the Googling process. So Vinny P is in the headlines a little bit because there was Ken Rosenthal confirmed. I believe I better double check that there were talks of Jesus Luzardo trade for Vinny Pasquantino, which would be pretty interesting. Unfortunately, that wouldn't really help his value from like a ballpark standpoint. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I'll double check that Ken Rosenthal.
No, that's just, we just apply everything to Ken Rosenthal, right? That's cool. It's sure. Just assume, right?
Yeah, right.
Joe, you had an interesting name on your list. I thought is Brian Hayes, who I mean, like you rewind a couple of years, and you're like, oh, Brian Hayes, that stud coming up.
Yeah.
You look at his minor league numbers, like, well, the average, I don't know, man, but like he's still developing and young and stuff. Like, dude, Pirates, like one of the guys I'm going hard after is Rowdy Tellez, who I think is going to have that first base. Connor Joe could play a bunch of positions, I think Tellez just shows up and DH first base and mashes home runs and stuff. And with Brian Hayes in that lineup too, like that Pirates lineup is also very interesting to me. All these bad teams lineups are very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian Hayes is going to be almost like one of those post-hype sleeper type things. Like he had such fanfare for a while, right? And it just couldn't stay on the field for first couple of seasons. And then, in 2022, he stayed mostly healthy, but it wasn't good, right? I mean, 20 steals, it was before the new base stealing rules. So 20 steals was pretty solid, but nothing else was there. He wasn't even drafted last year in most cases. Last year he turned it around. It was a pretty porous start for him. I think he had 9 steals. It was weird because he had like 2, and I was trying to pull up the splits here real quick.
Go ahead, man. We're loose here.
Yeah, he
second screen. We worship the second screen.
as you see it flickering over to the left.
You've got a nice blue view now.
Yeah, so he started off the first half. It was 5 home runs, 9 steals. Second, but a 250 average. So you're going, okay, same Brian Hayes that we're used to. Second half, it like completely flipped. 10 home runs, only 1 steal, and a 299 average.
Put it together, man.
I know, right? So like, I'm just kind of buying in on the, we all believe this guy had the tools, and he sort of put it together in 2 different halves. Maybe now's the year where you can go, okay, that second half is more likely what we'll get. We expect the speed to come back a little bit from the first half as well. Let's take another chance on him at a fairly decent draft cost. Like he's not super expensive still. Again, I kind of pulled up last couple of weeks ADP on NFBC, and it's 179. I'll take that.
Yeah.
How high does he have to go? Like I would assume he's got that name recognition. Like if we did this show March 10th, Brian Hayes would be maybe top 100 because people remember and they see him a little bit, like in the. And
if he starts crushing in spring,
yeah, it does some spring, in the first whoever when they play against like Pittsburgh's the college, their baseball team. Brian Hayes hit 2 home runs and 1 went out of the stadium. Like how high would this have to go? Like how high are you willing to chase Brian Hayes? Like would you stop at like 120? You're like, all right, like there are other options, or
I think that's about where I would stop with him, is around the 120 range. I think that, and that's where I've got him slotted in on our cheat sheet right now, is about 120. Things will change, but the very early release is around 120.
Van, how about you? Do you like kind of go on feel, or do you come like with like hard numbers, like your own rankings? That's where I'll stop.
Yeah.
And when there's helium, you're like, I gotta stop right now.
Yeah. I'm usually pretty chalky for the first 100 picks. For some reason, I think I'm like conditioned from my home league where it gets out of control after pick 100 on like go get your guy. That's when, to me, I'll be willing to reach a couple rounds, and by the time you get to the 180s, it's like I'll go out and grab a guy that's ADP is 300 if I really need that for my build. But yeah, it's an interesting one with Brian Hayes, man. Like I couldn't believe he's only been in the league for 4 years. Like I feel like I've gotten burned 5 or 6 times by the guy. Like, and that's why maybe that'll help his helium like cool off, and maybe he'll stay put at like 150, 160. But if he can put all that together, because he only played 124 games last year, so that 15-10 could look a lot more like 2020 if he can stay healthy. So. And like you said, it's an interesting lineup, but yeah, process wise, I don't know. I stay by the book with a lot of options early on, and then it's just kind of like all bets are off after like the 8th round.
Van, philosophical follow-up once again. When you say you get burned by Brian Hayes, right? Which would you rather have? Getting burned while he's on your team and he sucks, or getting burned that you liked him a lot and he wasn't on your team and he had like the breakout season? Which getting burned is worse for you?
Yeah, honestly, it's the FOMO. And that's why I'm like the guy who will drop and re-add the same player like 4 or 5 times throughout the season. Like there's a lot of guys. And our keeper rule in my like all important home league, which I know everyone wants to hear about, like our keeper rules are you have to draft and hold them the whole time. But I'm the guy who will drop them and pick them back up because I don't want anybody else to go grab, you know, whoever it is when they start breaking out.
Oh, I'm exactly the same way.
Right. It hurts. So, like that was and then you try and make a trade and you can't because like his value's at an all-time high. And then I'm like, I'll give you whatever you want.
Yeah.
At this point.
Oh, one time I literally texted and traded. I dropped Rowdy Tellez. And it was the day after I dropped him was when he had like 3 homers in one game, like a couple years ago. And I was freaking out and he hadn't cleared waivers. I texted my uncle Ed and I was like, hey, you're number 1 in waiver priority. Who do you want you grab Tellez, send him back to me and I'll deal you Chris Paddock. Like, yeah, the FOMO is out of control, man.
That's nice not to hit the commish. Like, oh, I didn't, like that was an accidental drop. I meant to.
right. I am the commish, so that
it has nothing to do with a 3 home run game.
Yeah,
I swear.
Just weird timing. Let's talk a couple busts because I know that maybe that was titled to everybody. I feel bad if we let them down. Joe, I don't want to get too deep into this Anthony Volpe. Is that more of like a how much he's going for? You know, like he's like maybe Volpe will be fine. Maybe he'll scratch 30-30 and his average will improve, but I can't pay that price for the risk involved, or you just not like him?
Yeah, it's more price. I mean, he's going at 130. I mean, he's going ahead of guys that have shown more. And I know, he's the super prospect that came up last year, but man, last year was bad. And, I started looking at him a little bit more too. His batting average dropped every year throughout the minors. And then he gets to the pros and it's like just abysmal. And that's a concern. He struck out at 30% clip in 2022, struck out at a 27% clip last year. He's really got to change his plate approach. In order for me to want to buy in, because even if he does give you 20-20, man, that 209 batting average, even if he could get it up to like 215, that's a killer. That's hard to roster.
Do you look at it and be like, well, let me give him like a little bit of a reasonable doubt thing because they got a new hitting coach and maybe they just messed with his head and like that whole chicken parm thing that happened halfway through the season when he went his little hot streak and everything. He's capable of it, right? Is it just maybe the wrong voices in his brain?
It's really hard to say. I mean, yeah, he needs to tweak his approach for sure. It could be hitting coaches. It could just be him putting a lot of pressure on himself. There's a lot of factors that go in. We see like guys like Manny Machado, like super all-stars, goes to sign a massive contract with San Diego, kind of blows up on you the first season. Trey Turner was horrible until, July, August last year. Like it happens to the best of them. He's a young kid. He comes in, just doesn't, New York's a tough place, tough market, man. Like you've got to perform or you're going to get booed. So, maybe all that kind of played into it. I think he'll be better this year, but looking at the plate approach a little bit deeper in, it's hard to draft him at where he's going right now. Give me like 2, 3 rounds, 4 rounds later. I think I would take the risk on him.
Who knows? I mean, like he might have a crappy spring and drop a little bit. People are like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah,
that's true.
Or maybe he'll tweak an ankle and that'll be like, oh, great. He's going to miss 2 weeks in April.
He feels like one of those guys though, that like will mash in spring just because he's facing weaker pitching. And then like once he comes up and he starts facing aces again, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. You worry about that.
I don't want to start like war here, but you had 2 Orioles on your bus list. You did clarify it's from an ROI perspective, but I do see Gunnar and Adley. You went first name only with them too, so yeah.
Careful.
Yeah, so I mean, most of this is I can take the personal side out, Joe. So yeah, put the knives away.
I put the Cardinals in my sleeper side. Just saying.
Okay, all right.
That's true.
I'm kidding, man.
Yeah, I like Grayson. So going back to the auction calculator.
Don't you dare mention a pitcher's name
on this segment. Yeah, sorry.
During PitchCon. Yeah.
So just strictly going off 5x5 auction calculator, those models are a lot smarter than I am. So I love looking at them as at least a key ingredient in kind of my process. And Gunnar Henderson, of all the top 30 players, there's only like 2 or 3 that are beneath $20 on a projected like dollar value. And Gunnar Henderson is down at $14 with an ADP of 30. So he's the 28th hitter taken. And all of the players around him have, auction values of like $29, $36, $26. And then you got Gunnar with $14. And I think part of the reason feeding into that, like another one that's way down there is Elly De La Cruz. But for me, projections are never going to capture that like absolute shooting star like Gunnar Henderson, where you're like Elly De La Cruz, where you're really expecting this like superstar to explode like a Fernando Tatis. When I look at Gunnar Henderson, even though he's got that youth on his side, I don't think he has that like limitless ceiling. And maybe Joe, you're closer to it, but I almost feel like he's a high floor youngster. So if the projections are a little bit more accurate on where they have Gunnar, the model's pretty much just spitting out that, they're not seeing that as that big of a value. 27 homers, 12 steals, 92 runs, 79 RBIs, 260 average. Like he's pretty good at a lot of things, but all in the mixer, it's not saying that that's a whole lot of value for 5x5. So strictly objective, but I'll see what your retort is, Joe.
No, I tend to agree with you here with Gunnar. And, it's funny. I because I wrote about him and in my top 10 lists. And my thing with Gunnar Henderson was that like last year, I was kind of saying the same thing. He was going a little too high for me in drafts. It was weird last year in third base, right? You had those top 6, right? This kind of stopped with Bregman. Then it was like maybe a round and a half.
Yeah.
And Gunnar was going. And then it was like a 4-round gap. And it was like Max Muncy.
You're
and
right.
I was like,
it was like the last, yeah.
And I was like, man, we're just like pumping Gunnar up because it's like you're afraid of that teardrop.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure that Gunnar was going to get to that level last year. He ultimately did, but man, through April and May, I looked like a genius. He was horrendous. 201, 5 home runs, striking at a 31% clip. June on, he was the guy that everybody wanted at third base. He was completely a different player. He dropped his strikeout rate to 23%. He was more aggressive at the plate. He hit 267 the rest of the way, 23 home runs, a ridiculous 52% hard hit rate, man. It's just unreal what he did from June on. And so I think a lot of what you're seeing with the ADP is that there was already that helium from last year. Then you're getting the June and finish on rookie of the year in the AL. People just love this guy, but yes, I'm with you that I think we need to like be careful. I'm not sure he's going to have that like explosive season. I don't know if that's in him.
Yeah. Great player, but is your second batter taken? Is he that elite in any category, or is he just like a solid stuff and things guy? But yeah, great point. His second half last year, maybe you double that, and that's like the ceiling in a way of like 33 homers, 12 steals, 270. Then you're looking at a pretty good player.
Yeah. The roster resource has Jackson Holliday penciled in as a starter, like right off the bat. Where are you guys on? I mean, is Jackson because I always feel like when this happens, again, we're in a new era where, the rookies are getting called up immediately and starting and everything. But like, is he a sleeper? Is he a bust? Is he going to be a little bit of both, like a slow start, have faith, and then like his real tools will show about halfway through? I guess since this is a sleeper and bust thing, what is Jackson Holliday to you, Joe? Like, where do you think he's going to end up eventually in ADP, like by March 25th? And then like, would you jump on him?
I don't even know where he is now.
I just had to look at
it. He's 200. Holy cow.
204. Yeah.
That's insane.
Insanely high or low?
I think it's pretty high. Like I don't know how you could take a guy that I'm not confident he starts the year out with the Orioles. I know shortstop is sort of a mess for them, so they could use it, but Mateo can fill that role. Until Holiday's super ready. He's a young guy, man. He's only 20 years old. I don't I'm not really putting a lot of stock into Holiday this year. I know he's super talented. That's I'm not a huge prospect guy, so I'm not the biggest one to talk about this, but I got other guys for the site that can cover that much better than me.
It's very nice of you to prop up your compatriots.
My crew.
That's how we're gonna spin that one. Van, how about you, man? Is it like I see if he's floating there like 350, it'd be like intriguing because this could go either they're going to keep him in the minors the whole year, maybe, or maybe he will start, by May 15th. Yeah. Who knows? Where are you on that?
Yeah, I think I would guess that he probably has one of the broadest ranges of min pick, max pick. There you go. It's min pick is 105, max pick is 309. Yeah. So it's one of those things that we're all kind of guessing in the dark until we get closer to like spring training and the all the news interviews and everything. But the player himself, I am excited about. I actually saw him launch a homer. He's got a sweet lefty swing here in Peoria. I was at a Chiefs game and I was like, wait a minute, I know that Jackson Holiday name. And then he just sent one. And I also just saw on MLB TV, they showed his like home lab, you guys. His family has like, they're well off.
Was that the barn?
Yeah, like the Morton building with like an indoor golf simulator and like a pitch. Yeah, he's got like batting cages in there. So him and his brother, I guess, are just straight up like, in grade school, we're like, yeah, I'm gonna go be a Major League Baseball player. And they're doing it. But I guess what I don't know, looking at all of his minor stats, is like he has really good walk rates, controllable strikeout rate, a really good hit tool. But from a power standpoint, he is yet to really go off in the minors. Now, granted, that's only like 100 games, but they have him projected on like Steamer, 126 games, 9 homers, 7 steals, and a 255 average. Like, yeah, I'll need to be convinced of a lot more to go for a 200 pick. So I would say bust in a vacuum there.
He hits a ton of ground balls too. So that's, he's got to fix that before we can get some power. I mean, his launch angle in AAA last year was 3.8. So
yeah, he's got the batting cage.
It's got to get changed. Yeah,
batting cage. Yeah.
I mean, exit velocity at 90, so it's going to get through at least. But the launch angle needs to get up in order to hit some power.
The splits could help that. The lefty ground ball guy.
We got like 4 minutes. I want to ask you guys just to wrap this up. Like I know we talk about sleepers and busts, but there's like this middle ground. We call it like Michael Waterloo did this thing, his obsessions. Like he writes about him every year. It's not exactly a sleeper. It's not exactly a bust, but it's like the player that they go after. I'll give you a minute because I don't put you on the spot with this. It just hit me. Like mine this year is Miguel Andujar. I think he's going to find a lot of playing time in Oakland. I feel like he showed the skills in that stint with the Yankees and then just got buried. Wow. Last year, he was one of my favorite players to draft last year, really late. And it just didn't pan out until like later in the season when he was long gone. But, like there's a path to playing time, I think, for him in Oakland. I think he's the typical Oakland underrated guy who can, just quietly hit 278 with 20 home runs maybe. And, remember him on the Yankees? So he's going to be my obsession, maybe just by, where he is. Like he's free at the very end of deep drafts and AL only leagues. I'll be getting him everywhere. How about you guys? Joe, you want to go first? Or Van? Does one of you guys have an obsession or
are we talking like a late hitter? Or where are the boundaries?
Who's this guy? Like, I just got to get him. I'm going to pay an extra $7 for him. I'm going to reach a couple rounds for him. I'm going to shout and tweet as loud as I can. Like, this guy is the one you want on your team, wherever he is. Like, who is that one guy who you're just going to like, and I guess hitter, of course. Yeah. Like, who's that one you're just like, I got to have him on. If I have 17 teams, I want him on all 17 at any cost.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from the list, like across ADP, Paul Goldschmidt stands out. I'm talking about all these Cardinals, but I really think Goldschmidt, Goldie's value is being suppressed so much. His ADP right now is 78. And I know people point to his age, but he is such an Iron Man. If you look at his like games played season over season, he's missed like 8 games in the past 10 years. Like this guy is a 35-year-old body. I don't care how old the birth certificate says, but all of his underlying stats look great. People talk about a first base cliff, and I'm like, you guys can go reach or pay for a career year from Matt Olson, who's great. I get it, but I'll wait until pick 80. What is that, like the 6th round, and get a guy who I can just chalk up to pretty much put up that Gunnar Henderson type of stat line of like 270, 30 hopefully 10 steals, and great counting stats in that lineup. So, not to be a total homer this whole show, but I want Goldie on a lot of my teams.
Joe, how about you?
You know, I mentioned him earlier, man. It's going to be Austin Hayes. He's super cheap. I mean, this guy, I've always liked him. He's got a little pop. That Orioles lineup is way better now. So if he can stay healthy, that's always been a thing for him. He misses a bunch of time. He plays through injuries, but we saw it. We've now seen it a few times. 22 home runs, 16 home runs, 16 home runs. Batting average went up last year. He'll not, the steals isn't there, but I mean, he's gonna provide some cheap runs and RBI for you. Super discounted. I mean, like, it's hard to find guys that can go 70 at runs and RBI where he's going in drafts.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, I feel like we were told 55 minutes. Does Nick just magically appear and is like, thanks, guys?
I think so. That's usually what happens.
Until he pulls the plug on us, though, Nando. I like, from a process standpoint, am I the only one that I actually have harder targets for pitching because, and then I'll let the hitters kind of fall to me that I like. But I'm curious if you guys are the same way, or if you go out there and say, like, I have to grab this hitter in this round. Because I definitely have a lot more of those for pitchers.
I need my, like, archetypes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I need my Garrett Cole, and they're like four of them, because I need to get those strikeouts with a low whip and a low ERA. And once they're gone, they're gone. Maybe you get a couple guys like a Tyler Glass now who sneaks up from a couple years, like the old Tyler. Not that anyway.
Yeah.
Later, I gotta hit I gotta hit pitcher 1, pitcher 2, pitcher 3 at certain points, or else I see that drop off, and I'm like, well, how am I gonna get strikeouts now?
I want to ask you real quick too. So you mentioned like getting those strikeouts early, right? So like and this was me apparently not reading the rules of the show. I put George Kirby as one of my, busts, and it was only because I think where he's going, his lack of strikeouts around that early range, I think limits where his value comes in, because like you can get guys later who do similar things to him, low ERA, low whip, he'll get a lot of wins. I get it. But that lack of strikeout ceiling, to me, I don't want him where he's going in drafts. I want the guys who, maybe the ERA and the whip isn't as good, but they're going to get you 80 more strikeouts than George Kirby. Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah. I've just said, like, Pablo Lopez and why am I blanking on Splitter for the Blue Jays? Kevin Gossman, they're going right next to him, and their strikeout numbers are way higher than Kirby.
Incredibly high.
I think Eflin is Kirby 50 picks later. Here we are talking about pitching, Nando.
Yeah. Nick's not going to stop us. I dare you. It's a charity. George Kirby, I feel in a weird way, is going to get hurt by those comments that he made about like not pitching late in the game. Like I just feel like if you're paying attention to what players are saying, if you were paying attention at the end of the year when Kirby was like, what he said, like something like 5 innings, 6 innings, and like it kind of paints him as this guy who doesn't have grit and won't go deep, and then you're going to lose some more counting stats and possibly wins if he wants to be out of games early. And I know he backtracked off of that, and then he did like the knuckleball, which probably just swung him right back into everybody's good graces.
Right.
But he's a guy who I wonder, like, if these comments maybe knock him down a round or two, and people look at that like, it's like, oh, I've got this bit of information about this guy who, doesn't love playing, like an Anthony Rendon, I don't love playing type, Like, I just felt that was really interesting.
And the Mariners,
that's cool. Anthony Rendon doesn't play anyway, so we're good with that, right?
Right.
Oh, sorry.
This is the quickest way to get Nick to interrupt us, is to start bad mouthing George Kirby, because the guy is big Kirby fan as well. But
I mean, I like, just like, if you just pay attention to like that guy had a swing of massive proportions of everyone being like, you're a whiner, you're a millennial. And then he does the day Tim Wakefield does, guy throws the knuckleball and confirms that's why he did it. And you're like, oh, we love you again. Like, you're amazing, George Kirby.
You're bad.
But I just wonder from the back of people's heads.
No, not allowed. No. George Kirby versus Kevin Gossman. This is so easy. Okay. This is very easy. Whatever gap you think is going to happen with strikeouts, which, by the way, Kirby's going to get more strikeouts than last year. It's going to be made up in whip. It's like going to be like a 105 versus like a 120. Because Gossman allows so many hits. That's a
Sorry, this is a hitting panel.
I'm telling you, the hits he allows.
Runs are the underrated category, not whip. Okay. Nick?
Well, that's for the Cy Young. Yeah. But no, George Kirby slander will not stand here. And Gossman just has one good pitch. That's a splitter. And Kirby's gonna be better. So you're wrong. But anyway, thank you guys so much for your insight on hitters that I know nothing about. You named all these people. Who's Gunnar Henderson and who's Paul Goldschmidt? I have no idea whatsoever. The Volpe thing is very interesting. They have the chicken parm. I don't know what to do. I don't. Is he going to be all right? I hope so. Chicken parm every day, hopefully inside of Yankee Stadium.
Every Italian, they did it to Tommy DeVito too. Every Italian in the tri-state area who plays a sport has their chicken parm moment, I guess.
Exactly right. But thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Really,
yeah, thank you, Dick.
It means so much to me that you guys take time out of your day to help support this cause. So, thank you so much, Nando, Joe, Van. Remind everybody what you're doing, Nando. Where can everybody find you?
I'm just behind the scenes of The Athletic, and I barely tweet, so you don't have to waste your time. Follow these guys instead.
Well, then, Joe, where do we find you?
Yeah, fantasy6pack.net, where you can find us. We just dropped our seasonal fantasy baseball cheat sheet. We're going to be launching a lot more of our fantasy baseball content here in the next week, and then all throughout the rest of the spring.